What are people missing?
I think people are missing the fact that we've had 130 years of the internal combustion engine.
Yep.
Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. That's the technology in very simple terms.
Yes.
And that's been fine. It's worked.
Yep.
And it's easy to start criticizing it now. But for a long time, it did the job. It worked.
Yep.
And we were all okay. Now we're shifting to electrification, as we know, for the reasons that are being explained. But I don't think we're tackling the main issue, which is the utilization of cars. The ownership of cars is predicated on having them do nothing for 90% of the time. Mm-hmm. That's the most inefficient part of the car, not the engine, not the motor, not the inverter, not the battery. Mm-hmm. It's the use case. So I think that's where, over these next few years, this next decade or two, that's where we need the real radical shift, not just a switch to electrification.
People tend to like to own their own things and use their own things and not to share.
They do.
That's sort of in our DNA. We don't want to share. We want to have their own stuff.
You're right. And in our own DNA, that not wanting to share and own stuff has got us to this point in terms of where we are with climate change.
Okay.
And I think that, maybe yourself and I, maybe the older generation, are more inclined to own things because we want it to say something about us.
Yes.
It's a badge. It's like a thing of us. Yeah. Whereas younger people are much more inclined to use things, to share things. It's a cultural thing amongst, I think, the younger generation and around the world. Different countries and different continents, different cultures. They've always shared because that's the best way to do it. And if you go back to like indigenous communities, they all share things. Not everybody has an axe. They share an axe. Not everybody has a this or that or the other. Because that's how, you can progress as a society, how a group of people can sustain their livings. And we've kind of gone off the charts a bit with this whole thing, we must own things. And that's part of why we're in the situation we're in.
But isn't it that we can afford to have our own things and then we do it? But where will we come to the point that we cannot afford all these things and then we start to share?
That's a very good point, and I think you're right. A lot of it is literally to do with economics, because we do these things because we can afford it. However, think about the younger generation. If I think about my kids now and younger people, education is more expensive than it used to be. Mm-hmm. Accommodation is more expensive than it used to be. If you add to that buying and owning a car, or running a car even, all the time, it's becoming uneconomic for a lot of younger people. So it's not even just a choice of let's share because it's good for the environment or good for anything else. It's a practical reality. So I think subscription-based propositions, car clubs, ownership things, all these things are so much better than just owning everything, possessing things.
Mm-hmm. So when do you think that will be really force a trend in the market that we will share the cars? Because now a lot of companies are trying. In Sweden they have problems. They are not really flying.
Yeah.
So when will it take off?
Good question.
What has to happen? Do we have an economic crisis before it happens, or what will need to happen?
Well, there's a few questions there, but if I can answer it this way, a lot of change happens slowly. But there was I think it was a German economist called Rüdiger Dornbusch said things take longer to change than you thought they would. Mm-hmm. Then things change faster than you thought they could.
Yes.
So I think that's going to happen with all of these things: electrification, sharing, a whole bunch of things. To begin with, they're a bit wobbly. They don't work very well. People can't make any money out of it. Then suddenly find the sweet spot. And whoosh, it goes away. It happens.
So when do you think the trend will fly?
I think it'll be a different timeline in different countries around the world.
Yeah.
Because you've got, ownership is dominant in the West,
yes,
and in Asian countries and African countries, not so dominant. So I think you're going to see a variation on that theme. So I think it's going to inevitably take longer in the West. But I would say over the next 10 to 20 years, in 20 years' time, if we're having this conversation, very few people will be buying and owning cars.
My guess would be that when you have the self-driving cars,
yeah,
then you can order a car and then you don't need to own it.
Yes.
So when we have self-driving nice cars, then it's okay to share.
I agree with you. And some of the challenges about, well, what if we all want to use that car at the same time? How will that work? And so on and so on. All of these are huge challenges, but we will find a way around them because that's what we're good at. We can land people on the other planets, on the moon. We can make things spin around the Earth. Every 90 minutes, the International Space Station, cooperation between the Americans and Russians. You know, all these things that seem impossible have happened and can happen again. You know, we just have to, you know, be confident and have the desire and the passion, the will to make it happen.
Yeah, well, you can have big fleets with self-driving cars, and then you will use them.
Yes.
But what will all these car manufacturers say about this? Because then they will sell a lot less cars, and then the brands will not be so important. So you will turn around the whole industry.
Yes, you will. And I think you pinpoint a couple of very important things there. That the auto industry has always worked on scale and volume, and that has to change.
An image.
Yeah, and
brand image.
Exactly. You know, brand in a way, once you have driverless vehicles and can call up whatever, because like Uber, you know, you don't say, I want a Mercedes Uber. No. You get an Uber, because it's going to take you from A to B.
Or whatever. You can have a premium if you like.
So I think brand will be diluted hugely. However, and this might sound, I don't know what it sounds like, but I think the kind of upper medium market and the luxury market will sustain a lot longer than the volume market, because there are people who have plenty of money.
Yes.
And they're quite happy to spend that money and own a car, even though financially it's like pretty crazy.
Yes.
So that's going to continue for some time. But I think we'll see mass adoption of, you know, commercial electric fleets. And we should see that quickly. Taxis, buses, vans, trucks, all that. Passenger car then splits into kind of two bits. The kind of, some would call it elitist, expensive, and then the rest of it will be volume, shared, and a bunch of other stuff.
So how do you see on the different topic, the conflict between China and Europe now?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah?
Well, here's the thing, and I talked about it on stage here at the show. The reality is what's happened in China with battery production and electric vehicle production hasn't been done in secret. It's been done in front of everybody, in front of all the economies of the world, and we've chosen to kind of, And now we're playing catch-up. The Americans' Inflation Reduction Act is a huge amount of money, nearly $400 billion, to actually try and capture up, you know, catch up a little bit. How we're going to do that, how they're going to do that, I don't know. As to Europe, I'm not sure. And the irony here is, as we see at the show here, lots of Chinese manufacturers, it could be that people's choice will be limited to more of the Chinese manufacturers on the simple basis that they're the only ones who've got the batteries.
That and can deliver a car.
Yeah, and that the European OEMs, maybe they want to sell more EVs, but if they can't get the batteries from the Asian battery suppliers, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So we've got to hurry up and build these gigafactories we keep hearing about.
Yes.
You know, Northvolt's a good one in Sweden, and there are others around Europe, and they're now building in America. But they better get on with it, because otherwise it's going to give us a bit of a problem.
Yeah, then we will not have the European car industry.
And that would be a very bad thing, because we've got some wonderful engineers, some amazing designers, some great product, and, you know...
A lot of people who needs work.
Yeah. And well, I've been in this industry for 38 years. You know, I'm proud to have been in it, and most of, you know, half of that time was with internal combustion engine cars and all the rest of it. Of course it was, because that's the past. But the last, you know, 18, 19 years have been with electric, and I really believe, you know, that's where we're going.
What do you think the European politicians should do now?
Well, I think a good physical movement would be by standing up and taking their head out of the sand, which is where it's been for some time, and actually thinking long term, and perhaps even starting to talk to their political opponents and say, we need to just think about this a bit more collectively. We will have our differences, we want to be in power and you're in power and all this stuff, but let's look at the bigger picture, which begins with the climate change challenge, number one. That's not political, and if it is, we're really in trouble. And then the second thing is, look at the geopolitics of where some of these economies, certainly Asian economies, are dominating now. And if we want to help our people and and have a balanced economy where it's not anti or pro-China or anything else, it's about having a reshaped economy that is much more localized and I won't necessarily say self-sufficient, but much more targeted and efficient. We've just learned a huge lesson about being, you know, very reliant on one country, and then when that country changes its opinion, we suddenly find ourselves in a hole.
Yes.
We cannot find ourselves in a hole with the climate, because we might be able to engineer our way out with the issue with Russia and Ukraine, but if we take on Mother Nature and think we're going to beat Mother Nature in a war, we're toast. There's no way we can win that.
So the politicians need to start building or help the industries to build battery factories. But
Yeah.
how can we compete with the Chinese brands who has got the Chinese government helping them, pushing money to them? I mean, it's not sort of a fair, the game is not fair.
Well, it might not be, but life isn't fair. But
No.
look at what they've just done in America. Belatedly,
Yeah.
admittedly, Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah.
Wallop hundreds of billions of dollars
Yes.
to actually get on with it.
Yeah.
Stop talking, start doing.
Maybe some of
that's what we're
the
seeing.
investments for Europe went to US.
That's one of the downsides of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, and, so unless we kind of rebalance things, it's going to start then being the superpowers.
Yes. And we
China
are
and America.
squeezed in the
We're,
middle.
yeah. We're like a tiny little bit of meat in a sandwich, whatever. Yeah, squashed.
Do whatever.
Yeah.
So, another question: how will Tesla's price reduction affect the car market?
Oh, that's a great question. It will a bit, and I think it will. I think he's smarter than people give him credit. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
he looks a bit odd in the way he behaves. But if you
Yeah,
think back,
yeah.
they put up the price of Tesla
Yes.
not that long ago. So to reduce the price of Tesla recently is kind of putting it back on a par in a way. But the impact it has on the market with competitors is it means they push their prices down,
Yeah.
which gets in the way of them being competitive and having an appetite to sell and make more electric vehicles. So it's good for Tesla, and I think given the momentum Tesla's got, both with technology, they've got a critical mass now, and the big thing that they have had and still have, which is massively important, is the charging infrastructure proposition.
Yeah.
Their charging marries with their vehicle marries with their chargers.
Yeah.
That ain't happening with everybody else.
Nope.
So, people that write Tesla off and say Elon Musk has, gone crazy and, all the rest of it, nope. Not in my opinion. That's not financial advice, by the way, because I'm not equipped to do that. But it's just my observation over nearly 20 years of all that's happening. This guy and this company, because of course it's not just Elon, it's thousands of really smart people in the team, hundreds of thousands now.
But the cost of production, steel, battery supplies, transport, fuel, electricity goes up really rapidly. So all the manufacturers, they are struggling to, if they sold a car for 1 or 2 years ago, then the prices to producing the car maybe it's gone up 40% or 50%. That's a big hassle, and it could be so that the expensive electric cars, they will not sell as many as they could have because they will earn more money on the other combustion cars.
Well, yes, there's a risk in that. But what I thought you were about to say was the fact that they will focus on the higher price, more expensive vehicles, which is part of the reason why I'm suggesting mass adoption of electric vehicles won't happen. And that big chunk of 20, 30, 40 million vehicles that get made in the middle won't get made in the same way, because the center of gravity goes right to the top, and that's where you can make fewer cars but make more money.
Yes.
Partly because the components, as you explained, are more expensive.
Yeah.
So
I thought that the Chinese would come in with cheaper cars to the market, but they are not.
no, and maybe they will eventually. I think That being said, the MG, the MG4, that is a sweet spot. Good price, good product, good charging proposition. So it can be done, but I still stand by what I say that just switching all of the cars we make to electric is not the future.
So if we should wrap it up, what is essentials in this discussion? What should we take with us as a consumer, as a politician, and so on?
Well, I think we mustn't lose sight of, the first principle of everything that's going on now, which is to tackle climate change, is to reduce, the carbon parts per million in the air, because if we don't, then everything else is irrelevant. Everything else about what any country does starts to dissolve and disappear as extreme weather starts to damage, agriculture and crops, and we start to see mass migrations. Because climate change isn't an event that happens on a Monday morning. Nope. It's a progressive, thing that happens, and we know and can see it's happening. So I think whatever we do, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's a different form of agriculture and diets and flying and all these other things, we have to take them all into consideration and not forget why we're doing any of it. It's to try and secure the future for humanity and all the other species, and not screw up this wonderful, glorious planet that we were gifted, and not carry on with the crazy chemistry experiment.
So are you an optimist?
Yeah, I am actually.
Yeah. So why are you that?
I am because I think there is a groundswell of opinion on this. The younger people are less selfish and more. They're not so inclined to own things like my generation has done. So that's what I think. It's all of those things. And also a big thing is money now can sniff that getting involved in, if you like, the green revolution, green economy. There's a lot of money to be made in there. That's a significant part of why it'll happen, in my opinion.
And are you a technology optimist as well?
Yes, I guess I am. But the one aspect of that I'm a bit fearful of is that artificial intelligence ends up kind of turning humanity into its bitch. We become. It delivers many of the solutions that we've got, but then we become subservient to it. And then it ends up like, 2001: A Space Odyssey with Hal locking, Dave, the astronaut, outside the ship. There is a serious danger that we get somewhere to that place.
Yes.
Sorry, I hope that's not pessimistic. You asked me.
So what car do you have yourself?
I've just got an ID Buzz.
Yeah.
So very happy with that. I wanted it because I have two big dogs. They have to go in a dog crate. They sit in the back.
Yeah.
And I also liked it because it makes me look younger than I am, and therefore going back to ownership and brand is that kind of that whole thing.
So you are in this loop as well.
Yeah, I am. I'm a hypocrite.
Car.
I'm doing the very thing I'm telling people not to do.
You are.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.